In May, the city lost its third police commissioner in 3 years, and I know that you're in the process of searching for a permanent replacement. Give us a sense of how much patience whoever gets the job deserves to change things around, because they would have their hands full with a lot of things to solve.
Okay, so I just want to be real clear, because we lost, I've hired one police chief. One was there when I got there. One had a problem with the filing of their taxes, would still be there otherwise. But it is a challenging city as it relates to reducing violence. In fact, working with the previous police chief and even the one who was let go, well, we have been focused on reducing violence since I've been in office. But in November, we created an initiative called the Violence Reduction Initiative. So we've been reducing violence now. Every month since November, we had an uptick in April, but almost a 50% reduction in May. Overall, about a 24% reduction this year.
Yes, and you've been praised for forming a 7-person committee to assist you in the search for a replacement. I wonder, what's your #1 requirement for a police chief?
Well, one, that they understand that the city is under a consent decree. Two, that they must do constitutional policing. Three, that they have to create a community engagement process and proper cultural diversity training that allows for more community input, and that we develop a relationship with our community that creates a public safety environment.
Mayor Pugh, turning to the national situation, there was a lot of optimism when among some people, when President Trump came into office, that we were going to get some sort of big national infrastructure plan. Seems like people aren't particularly optimistic about that happening anytime soon. But if there were going to be some sort of serious push towards infrastructure investment, from your perspective, from the perspective of a city mayor, where could we get the most bang for our buck?
Well, let me just say that I think there's still optimism around opportunity zones and infrastructure dollars. I always brag that I was one of the first mayors who prepared the letter for President Trump before he was president, right before he was inaugurated, when he came to Baltimore for the Army-Navy game, because I heard him talk about infrastructure needs. And many of our cities like Baltimore, are under federal mandate to fix its infrastructure, especially as it relates to its water system. And so what they've created now is this opportunity zones, and you have to prepare those. And just being here in January, learned a lot about the opportunity zones. So Baltimore prepared its package that had to be submitted to the governor, and of the 44 neighborhoods that we submitted, 42 have been designated as opportunity zones. But we're not waiting for that. What we also have done is, thanks to the approval of the City Council, we have created a $50 million investment fund to invest in neighborhoods and communities in our city that have been underinvested in for decades. Our goal is to expand that to about to attract investment of about $200 million a year for the next 5 years, to create a $1 billion fund so that we can refocus our investment on neighborhoods and communities that have been underinvested in.
Mayor Pugh, I read an article recently talking about the chronic absenteeism of children in schools, and I know you have a challenge as well with reducing population size. I just wonder how you tackle something like this, which is so fundamental to not just funding as it comes in per student, but also about the future for the city in particular. When you've got a problem with education, with confidence among children, about those that aren't attending school, how do you rebuild and prevent a further decline at this stage?
Okay, so I should say to you that the first thing you should know is that being a state senator, in my last year being a state senator, we brought back $1 billion to build new schools in Baltimore. We're on pace to build more new schools in our city than the entire state of Maryland. While I don't run the school system because we have a CEO, I work very cooperatively with the school system. We've also made Baltimore City Community College free in Baltimore, and now the entire state has done the same thing. Wow. And what we found, we were projecting that we would have a couple hundred young people who wanted to go to Baltimore City Community College, and I can tell you that we're over 500 currently. We also created a jobs fair for our young people, and we had over 100 companies who employ our young people. So what we're doing is trying to create a culture of not just caring for our young people, but helping them to see the pathway forward to a brighter future living in our city. So we're working, creating apprenticeship programs, work programs, and working with our school system to get them to to make sure they're accountable for every single youth in our school system, not just in terms of them being present, but in terms of them latching on to opportunities that are available for them for their future.
Mayor Pugh, we started with crime, which is obviously a big challenge for the city, and Julia mentioned population and education as well. What's important to remember here is that all of this is happening against the backdrop of a pretty strong U.S. economy. So my question to you is, what happens if the broader U.S. economy weakens? Where does that leave Baltimore?
Well, that's why we created our own investment fund, because we're not waiting for what the economy does. We're looking at what we can do as a city to stir and to get private and public partnerships that will work for the future of our city.
Yes.
So as a result of the $50 million fund, we believe that we'll be able to attract private investment, philanthropic investment, because we have so many assets in our city. When you think about Baltimore, you think about the Inner Harbor, you think about the development of Port Covington, a $563 million TIF project. We think about the need for more affordable housing. And so when we look at what we're doing, not waiting on the federal government, not waiting on states, but creating an investment pool that will attract private dollars so that we can continue to move our city forward.